Welcome to Unplug from Worldly Thinking. In today's episode, we're going to discuss how to become intentional with your time. With me is Patrick, my co host and friend and brother. And how's it going, Patrick?
It's going well. Excited to kick this series off finally. Kind of redoing it. Follow some of our other channels, you know what that means. But
Been a long time coming, and
yeah,
here we are redoing this series in a way that's 100% from a psychological and secular viewpoint, so that way it's non quote offensive or bothersome for people who follow different belief systems. And we want to be able to have this material out there for everybody, so everybody can benefit from it and not feel like they're being preached at or talked to or whatever. So I'm looking forward to redoing this series. We're starting off with become intentional with your time, because it's a huge foundational platform for a lot of things that we teach, and we'll probably
right,
even get into a little bit on other things as we give examples. So
of course. I'm
if
really excited to start with this one, just because it build this one builds off of everything else we're going to talk about in this series. So it's
Absolutely.
exciting.
Yep, it sure does. And if you're listening on the broadcast where we're doing the premiere here, Patrick and I are probably hanging out in the chat, so we'll be able to answer questions as we go along. If you're listening on replay, you can leave your comments below, and Patrick and I will respond to those in an appropriate manner. But let's go ahead and get started.
Sounds good.
So, becoming intentional with your time, we're going to discuss defining and measuring time, making time, our physical lifespan and how it relates to time, discussing the past, present, and future, and how to become empowered with time rather than a victim of it. Let's talk about defining and measuring time. Merriam-Webster says the indefinite continued progress of existence and events in the past, present, and future regarded as a whole. We measure time in terms of seconds, minutes, hours, days, years, using clocks, calendars, etc. Worldly thinking on time is I don't have time, or I didn't have time. And I wanted to hit on this real early in this teaching. Is oftentimes you'll hear people, when they're asked about getting something done or doing something, they'll say, I didn't have time, or I don't have time to do that. And that is just a victimizing statement. It's not the truth by any means. It's somebody's reality of it, but it's not the truth. The problem with this is if you have that I didn't or don't have time mentality, then you're taking ownership of your time that you do have. You want to touch on that at all, Pat?
Yeah. So really, again, why I'm glad we're starting with this is just a foundational piece. Is me and John have the saying is we never say we didn't have time, or we sure do our best to. That probably slips out occasionally, but we do our best to say, just wasn't a priority. And we'll kind of break down what that means a couple slides later, or it might be the next one as well. But
Mm-hmm.
um, pretty much the whole point of this is really to give you or get you to kind of start thinking a different way about how you prioritize your time and manage your time. That way you can take ownership of your time, because whatever it is you want to do in your life, whatever it is you want to achieve, ultimately, and this is a basic concept, it's not a mind blowing revelation here, but you're going to have to put time to it. And we're really just trying to unpack, what does that look like? What does that mean? How can we prioritize our time better? Just throughout it, we'll probably throw in little examples here and there. Just
Yep.
we like to give some practical application to all of what we're teaching as well, because it's sometimes it can be a little just, yeah, here's some skills, but no idea what it looks like to apply it. And I think it's important that we provide that to
Yeah,
anybody who's
absolutely.
watching this.
Yeah, because what we're doing here is we're teaching you how to become these things or learn these things authentically rather than just acting them out without the foundational information you need.
Sure.
And the other thing is, they say there is never enough time. There's just not enough time. I didn't have enough time. There's not enough time. There's just time. Time is a finite concept. You have 24 hours in a day. Everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. And you make time, which we're going to get into in this next slide as I go to making time. And people make time according to whatever's a priority for them in that specific moment. Now, human beings that are mostly unaware of how do you prioritize your time, we're going to break it down into three specific categories for what people make time for and why they make time for those things. So, what do they make time for? We make time for whatever is a priority in each specific moment, and those priorities are number one priority, physiological needs. This is the air you breathe, the food you ingest, the water you ingest or drink you ingest, your sleep, your warmth, your excretion, and sex. Those seven physiological needs drive behavior when those needs go unmet. Now, we can have perhaps different cognitive resistances to those to a degree, but at some point, it's going to drive behavior always. And then number two, which is things that we really start making choice for or decision for, is number one, seeking pleasure. So priority number two after physiological needs is seeking pleasure. Human beings, by and large, are pleasure-seeking individuals. They draw to what feels good and they run away or avoid what does not feel good. And pleasure seeking is the number two priority. So if it's not a physiological need, now we're getting into what feels good. And these things can be like recreational activities, conversations, relationships, work or labor. And they give us these internal neurotransmitters and chemicals called oxytocin, dopamine, orexin, adrenaline. Oxytocin, just real quick, is a bonding neurotransmitter. Happens on skin to skin contact. Dopamine obviously can be elicited through good feelings or specific foods or even substances like drugs or alcohol. Orexin is your neurotransmitter and neuropeptide that regulates wakefulness as well as appetite. And then adrenaline, which is, you get that adrenaline rush inside of you that prepares your body for physical action. And that's why they have adrenaline junkies out there for like extreme sports or extreme things that they do in terms of parachuting, bungee jumping, risk taking, those type of things. And then priority number three is avoiding displeasure. So if it's not a physiological need or something that you're seeking pleasure for, you're seeking to avoid something that could cause you displeasure, such as physical pain and discomfort, sadness, fear, disgust, anxiety, depression, anger, regret, guilt, embarrassment, shame, loneliness, loss, rejection, abandonment, etc. So anything that doesn't feel good, we may do something to avoid a negative consequence or a negative perceived consequence for our own state of feeling or state of being. So, Patrick, what do you got to say about these three priorities?
Well, priority number one, I pretty much it seems pretty obvious. Again, we're just trying to lay a foundation here, which of like how we associate and where we place our time. So, well, yeah, of course you make time to eat, sleeping, but it needs to be in there just because it is a basic concept. But if we put time towards it, the two and three though, that's kind of where we're probably going to spend most of our time um, talking about. Funny enough, um, because those are the two that we can kind of manage the most.
Sure.
Um, as far as and really I kind of want to just focus on number three of like avoiding displeasure. Like when we get into some of our other teachings, like the whole discomfort, sadness, fear, disgust, anxiety, depression, like all those emotions that are listed down there, like those are never going to feel good. They're designed to not feel good for a reason, and reasons we'll unpack in other um, teachings and
Yep.
I guess videos that we're going to do. But what it means is I want to focus on those because if we're able to manage what feels pleasurable and what doesn't feel pleasurable better, we're going to be able to live in kind of category two a lot more and be a lot more, I guess, productive and effective with our time. For
Right.
example, like a lot of times, I know when initially when I was starting like learning to manage my time and learning to I'll branch off into kind of the healing thing a little bit here, but learning to manage my emotions, I should say, is what I'm branch off into. Manage my emotions. Like at first, it was difficult to put time towards. Okay, I just need to reflect on these situations and do this because it didn't feel good. But over time, like I could see the future benefit of it
Right.
in future situations where I didn't necessarily feel those emotions as heightened anymore. So sometimes I think we have this ability as humans to kind of we've learned how to have delayed gratification. So pretty much if there's something that might be displeasurable now, it may be worth going through the process of making time for that displeasure so that you can have something pleasurable in the outcome. And you kind of have a good example about with kids doing homework and how to kind of um, I guess encourage them to do homework if they're struggling in that area because it's kind of a real solid example that parents all the time have to deal with. So if you want to share that example, I think it'd be a kind of
Yeah,
good
absolutely. Yeah, what
yeah, good analogy of like what I'm trying to say with the delayed gratification thing.
Yeah, because a lot of kids aren't making time to get their homework done or making school a priority. Because number one, they're not receiving any physical, or I'm sorry, they're not receiving any type of pleasure, intrinsic or extrinsically, from it. Like they don't get rewarded by doing their schoolwork in their own state of being. And then also, there's no displeasure for it because a lot of parents are busy with their own lives and they're trying to take care of things, and they don't want to avoid the headache. They'll be like, "Oh, natural consequences will take care of itself." But if you can realize that your child is doing or not doing their homework according to these three priorities, you can help them find pleasure in doing homework. Obviously, you can give them displeasure, which means you give them a consequence. So they're punished when they have bad grades or they don't get assignments done or they get a call from the teacher and there's a negative consequence. So they may do schoolwork to avoid displeasure of consequence, but that's a priority three, which means if there's other priority twos of pleasure seeking, they won't have that'll override the displeasure. In a lot of cases, they'll like risk versus reward. I'll take the reward always. When it comes down to making schoolwork a priority, number two, which is pleasure seeking, there can be a positive reward for that. You know, hey, you get straight A's and you earn X amount of money, or you be able to receive a gift or a trip or a privilege. So there's some pleasure in maybe not in doing the homework in itself, but the thought and feeling that I'm doing this with the potential of having pleasure in the future. You can also redirect your kids towards, hey, it gives you the opportunity to go to college. And then if you go to college, you get the job you want. If you get the job you want, you can have the things that you want. And if they can visualize those future pleasurable moments, walking down an aisle with pride, with and getting your diploma, or if it's a situation where they're receiving extrinsic value in terms of money, or they're getting intrinsic value in terms of recognition, if you can assign pleasurable activity to even a difficult task, that's still pleasure seeking for that person. So I think that's the example that Patrick was referring to of, how do you help your kids do schoolwork if they don't want to do schoolwork? Make it a priority too, and teach them how to find value in it rather than just focusing on, the consequence and the punishments of it.
Right. And I think that'll probably take different forms as just to stick with the homework example as your kids grow older. Like when they're younger, it might be more reward based versus as they get into high school and stuff like that, it's very much, hey, whatever it is you want to do in your life, like those are going to take money or those things are going to take money. So can you visualize doing those things? Here's some of the things that might not be as fun you have to do right now in order to achieve that later on in life.
Sure, absolutely. All right, moving on to the next slide. Our physical lifespan. So we all have maturing and aging and death, and every human being is born with a physical death sentence. And that may sound kind of morbid, but it needs to be struck home as a point because if you don't realize that your time here on earth is finite, you may not make time in ways that you would if you're just like, I got all the time in the world. I can always do that tomorrow. I can always, get this done later. And people put things off. Human beings are professional procrastinators. Why do in this moment what we can do tomorrow or later? And then later becomes never. And that's a problem. So if you realize your time's finite and you look at things in a serious ways, then you realize it's important to make time for things according to what's going to be beneficial for your own life. And that gets into things like purpose and legacy and impact. What is your purpose? What value do you serve in society, within your family, for yourself? What type of legacy do you want to leave behind? What type of impact with your time are you having on the community or yourself or your family or friends? Those things are all important to consider when you're thinking about time management. And when you are dead, who's going to remember you? That's a question that a lot of people don't think about, but when you die, your children, if you have them, may remember you. Your grandchildren will probably remember you. But when it gets down 3, 4, 5 generations, What legacy did you leave behind? What impact or words or phrases or thoughts or ideas carried down through the ages? With today's opportunities in media, you can write books, you can write memoirs, you could produce videos like what we're doing right now, and it leaves a legacy for what you're leaving, both with yourself and also on this human race. And I think a lot of people don't consider, gee, how am I impacting everybody else? They're just worried about themselves for pleasure seeking. But I find pleasure in that it could be rewarding to more than just myself or just my kids or just my grandkids or just my family. It could be rewarding for the world for the information that I have to pass on. So let's do this. And that's what Patrick and I are here to do on this Unplug from Worldly Thinking, is get people out of negative worldly thinking thoughts and get them into empowerment, making their lives better, being purposeful in what they do and intentional in what they do with their time. You want to hit on anything on that?
Yeah, sure. So the thought of I know we've kind of said in probably talks in previous talks before this video of like, our lives kind of matter, but they kind of don't matter. And in the sense of they don't matter, I don't mean that in the sense of a nihilistic screw it kind of way. But like you said, 3, 4 generations from now, at best we probably live maybe 125 years or something like that.
Sure.
I think that's the oldest
Max?
person.
I'm not
I'm
going
not
to
sure.
make it near that much.
Yeah, I probably won't either. But in any case, like that's like nothing in this whole span of how long humans have been around. So in a sense, yes, we have a few people like Einstein, or we're always going to remember a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates or people like that. Like they did something crazy and impactful for the world. Not everyone's going to be like that. You get forgotten. However, the various moments we have with the people that are around us that we interact with, whether it's like a moment with a stranger on the street that you help, or I mean, we all have those moments with a close friend of ours. Like, you remember that time we did X or whatever, and it's like all this crazy story about some crazy adventure. Like those moments matter. Those moments are so important. And what matters in those moments is the impact both of you have on each other. So,
Sure.
in a sense, we can all have an Einstein moment where we're remembered in forever, kind of forever in the lifespan of the people we interact with. And that's important. It's important
Absolutely.
because we all have something to, well, the majority of us, I believe, have something we've learned that we can pass on to somebody else so that their life can be better. At the very least, they don't make the same mistakes we did. Which
Right.
again, it's not necessarily a mind blowing idea, but I think a lot of times those simple concepts get lost, and we don't be intentional about how am I improving the lives around me in whatever way I can. For
Yeah.
me and John, it's making these videos. I mean, me personally in my life, it's the people at my job that I can talk to and kind of just improve some of the things they do better, whether it's budgeting stuff I've learned or relationship stuff I've earned, learned. And those are the moments that matter. So the whole idea behind that is, yes, in the grand scheme of things, you're not going to be remembered for all that long. However, we can do things in little moments that we have to pass on what we know and to improve the lives of those around us.
Sure. Because if even something in something we say or something we do gets incorporated into somebody else's life in terms of how they think and how they do things, and then it spreads to the next person and the next person, you're leaving your legacy and footprint in that way as well.
Sure.
That your influences that you have on others have an impact and a ripple effect, so to say, as well. So, what will you have left behind? So, when you're gone, 100 years from now, what will you have left behind on the earth? What type of impact will you have had? Is there any type of legacy? What was your purpose that you fulfilled? If it was just pleasure seeking, then it's going to end with you. If it was, pleasure seeking for the benefit of others, it can last and have a positive impact and legacy for the world. And it's so let's talk about the past, present, and future. Can yesterday be any different? And I ask this question to get people into a mindset of understanding time and understanding what we have the ability to do and not ability to do. You ask people this question, can yesterday be any different? No, it cannot. Yesterday was exactly what it was going to be. People made decisions according to what was going on biologically, cognitively, experientially, and emotionally in that moment in time. And because those four factors work together in a specific way, it could not have been any different. Could it be different tomorrow if you learn something new? Absolutely. But in the past, it couldn't. So, therefore, can today be any different? What you know is what you know. What you've experienced is what you've experienced, and how you feel, therefore, about your stimulus around you that you sense with your internal and external senses could not be any different. So, by and large, today generally isn't going to be any different than it is. However, can tomorrow be any different? It can be different than it would yesterday because you could learn new things and experience new things that create a positive change. However, in most cases, it's only going to be different in the sense of different than what you would do today or do yesterday. It's not going to be any different than it will be tomorrow because tomorrow is the past a week from now. A week from now is in the past a month from now. And it's a difficult concept to process, but you're going to learn and experience new things between now and X time when you make the next decision. And that's going to have impact on the choices, decisions, expressions, and feelings that you do make. So that's why I'm bringing up these questions about can yesterday, today, and tomorrow be different so that you change your perspective for how you view what can or can't be done, what will or won't be done. Anything you want to touch on that?
I'll probably touch on more in the next slide because we kind of break down how these all play out with how we think.
Sure. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk about the past, present, and future. In the past, the way that the world thinks is they ruminate on the past, which means that they're looking to see whose fault it was, who was responsible, who's to blame for what happened in that moment. And rather than blaming yourself or blaming others in an unhealthy way, we're going to talk about reflecting on a moment rather than ruminating. Because let's say, a day ago, a year ago, 10 years ago, there was a traumatic or negative experience that you went through. Horrible thing, could not have been any different in that specific moment. Every time that you rethink about that moment with the same framework or viewpoint that you have, then you're re traumatizing yourself and re experiencing that negative impact in the same way. So that's what I mean by rumination. You're going through the event again, going through the event again, and now every day, whether it's today, tomorrow, 10 days, 1,000 days, 10,000 days, you're re traumatizing yourself. That's how post traumatic stress disorder develops. Over and over and over, you're re traumatizing yourself. It's bad enough it happened once, but now you, through your cognitive responsibility, are reliving it. And then you're victimized saying, oh, I can't stop thinking about it. Well, no, you can stop thinking about it. You can redirect your thoughts. You just have to learn how to. And it's possible to learn something new of how do you properly ground yourself and stay present rather than ruminating in the past. And we'll talk about that when we get into reflection. The empowerment way of viewing the past is through reflection. Number one, you're realizing the moment couldn't have been any different. What happened in the past could not be any different. Stop wishing that it was. It can't be any different. A person makes decisions based on their cognitive and experiential and biological and emotional processes. If they're damaged or they're faulty or they're impaired, that's when those horrific things happen. Couldn't be any different. This is kind of like where we start to bleed off into our healing teaching, how to truly heal. But the reality of it is, if you don't reflect on the past in a healthy way and use like, hey, this is what happened, couldn't have been any different. What can I learn today to make my life better? Do I know how to be cognitively empowered? Do I know how to be biologically healthy? Do I know how to be experientially healed? Do I know how to manage my emotions in a healthy way? If you learn these four things, you'll have a healthy framework for how you view negative, traumatic, and past experiences that are troublesome that could create triggers in the future. So you want to go ahead and touch now, Pat?
Yeah. So pretty much like kind of going back to what we said in the slide before about the past not being any different or yesterday not being any different. If you, I kind of more go into the future side of things, but if you knew what you knew before that, or let me restart that. I'm sorry. But if you knew what you know now at that event, would it have been different? Of course it would have. However, you had never gone through whatever it was that you went through that was difficult or traumatic or anything like that. So, of course, you were handling it the best you could in the moment, given the skills that you had. We can't go back and change the skills that we have. So, that's what John's kind of saying about ruminating on it is why ruminate on something that you kind of had no ability to change in the first place, anyways? What we can change is obviously we've established we can't change the present moment either, given that all of our experience, all of our knowledge, all of our how we do life, how we do things is given to us right in that moment. So that can't be different either. But what we can change is the future. And the question I often ask is, how do you know what you're going to learn between now and the end of the week? Or let's just take it to use this video as an example. How do you know what you're going to learn between now and the next video we put out? And the honest answer should be, well, I don't know what I'm going to learn between now and then. And that's the point. If you are able to gain some new knowledge or gain some new understanding or new way of thinking about X thing or gain some new skill about how to do X thing, you can improve that in the future. And that's why rumination doesn't matter, is because I didn't know what I didn't know back then. So it went the way it went. How can I take this and move forward from it? And something to be said is, eh, what's the example you use? It's like it's not necessarily that the only way you could learn something is go through a traumatic event, because that's not true either.
No, no, you're not learning from the horrible event. You're reprocessing a event, horrific or otherwise, in a new or different way. You have a new lens, a new way of perceiving, a different framework for how you look at things compared to how you did in the past. Because people look at traumatic events in different ways according to the knowledge and experience that they've been a part of. This is why everybody who goes through a traumatic event doesn't experience PTSD, because some people are more resilient and healthy than others before they've experienced that event. So that plays a large factor in terms of you send 100 soldiers over and they experience horrors of battle. Everyone who comes back is not going to have PTSD. And it's going to be different for each individual, even if they have the same experiences, because of the cognitive framework for they have for how they view it and their abilities to manage emotion and their abilities to heal from experiential traumas or negative situations. And that's what we have to, when I say learn something new, we're not learning from the horrific event. We're learning how to perceive a horrific event in a healthier way.
Right.
All right, moving on to the present. In the present, unhealthy worldly ways of thinking are worrying, escaping, seeking revenge, engaging conflict, etc. And people in the present worrying about what's going to happen in the future. The future is going to be what the future is going to be. You have no idea between now and that moment what you're going to experience or what you're going to learn between then and now, or what other people are going to learn and experience between now and then. Stop worrying about it. You're going to manage the moment when it happens. Escaping, which is getting into, can't deal with these negative situations, need to escape into something pleasurable. And we'll talk about that more intently when we get into the video that we do. Seeking revenge, definitely another unhealthy thing. If somebody did something horrible to you, something's horribly wrong with them on the inside. And if you do something in an vengeful way, you're just pouring gasoline on their already immense problems. So you're making them a worse version of themselves to be able to do worse and horrible things. And then engaging in conflict. Like, if you're going to have an argument, great. Use an argument to get to truth. But don't just purposely engage in conflict to pick a fight. You're not there to pick a fight unless it has a potentially beneficial, positive outcome in the end. And then what's an empowerment way, which is having a level of contentment, which means you learn how to be content in situations that make most people discontent or unhappy or anxious or afraid or depressed or whatever. You're constantly seeking truth. You're constantly seeking new information that makes your life better in terms of the way that you process life around. Then practicing positivity. Practicing positivity isn't just being a happy and yeah and rah type person. Everything's wonderful and you're wonderful and we're all a bunch of wonderful people. No, practicing positivity is doing things that bring about benefit for yourself without hindering or harming others. So again, things that are beneficial for yourself Practicing positivity, doing things that are intentionally beneficial for yourself and don't bring harm or issues or problems to other people.
Yeah, and the practicing positivity one is probably the one I would focus on the most. If there's nothing else you get out of the this particular video, it would be practicing that positivity. And the reason I say that is, and why I said at the top, like this is just a great foundation for kind of everything else we're teaching, is because that practicing positivity thing and focusing on the positive side of things versus the negative side of things is going to be the key to a lot of change that happens in your life. Whether it be pursuing your goals and just understanding that this is a positive thing I'm pursuing, and I may have to go through some things that aren't quite as fun in order to get there, or if it's from healing from the past and recognizing that having a positive viewpoint of one, yourself in the event, and two, any assailant or whatever it may be in that event as well is going to be crucial for that. But just to use a real simple example of kind of quitting smoking, they've done studies before on people who've quit smoking, and they found that they have a lot more success if the people trying to get them to quit and the smoker themselves focuses on the positive aspects of quitting rather than the negative aspects of like, I'm gonna go through like a, the headache and the withdrawal and the cravings, but and rather they change them to, well, you're gonna have better health, you're gonna be able to breathe better, like all those things. Like our minds work such that we, going back to that priority slide, if we can focus on something pleasurable, we're going to get a better response out of our minds, out of
Right.
our out of ourselves. Really, it's kind of like,
The state of being.
right, and it's kind of like, it's a silly example, kind of, but it's kind of like putting the right and high quality fluids or oils into your engine. You get a better result than if you use crap stuff. You know, if you
Yeah,
can
same thing
put,
with our bodies when it comes to food.
right, exactly. If you put good food in your body, you tend to feel better. You're more healthy. You, as somewhat of an athlete, you tend to run better. And rather than if you're eating, if I go run around after eating Arby's or something like that, it's not going to feel very good
Well, of
because
course.
your body needs that fuel that's healthy.
Yep,
It's the same
exactly.
thing with like, and again, to go back to John's point, is like, we're not here to be like, everything's happy and positive thoughts and positive vibes all the time and rah rah, gear you up to just go kick ass. But at the same time, there needs to be a certain mindset with inside of you that one is positive and two says, I am going to achieve this. I don't believe in necessarily like the secret stuff or the stuff with the secret, which John
Yeah.
can explain what that is a little bit better than I can. But at the same time, if you have a mindset that you're going to do something, it will drive you to go do that rather than just this wishful dreaming or this wishful thinking or wishful, I wish it always wasn't like this. Well, change your mindset and go start seeking ways to do that. Put time towards that.
Yeah, and the secret stuff, as Patrick called it, is The Secret, which was a book, and also a movie slash documentary type style thing that they did. It's out on Netflix if you want to go see it. It's talking about the law of attraction, that your mindset attracts like things. So if you put out this positive vibe and this good vibe, and you visualize, driving the Ferrari and having all the things you want in life in the future, that the universe is going to reward you and give those things back. And the majority of the stuff in The Secret is pseudoscience. So what I mean by that is there's no factual evidence based information that sits there and says that that stuff's true. The reality of it from a psychological standpoint is this: if you're thinking positively and visualizing yourself in those moments, you're creating an internal change within your inner being. And then your inner being changes create future decisions tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, that are going to be more positive. If you see yourself as an engineer and you visualize that engineer, you're going to be more motivated, again, with number two, pleasurable seeking priority, to do those things and the steps necessary to achieve those goals. So that's what you usually find, and why, quote, the secret works is people with positivity and positive viewpoints create an internal state of being change within themselves, unknown, and then they go execute those things so that they can occur for their lives. So it's all psychological in its nature, not this woo woo stuff, with pseudoscience and the way that the secret presented itself, like it's this mystery law of attraction. There's no law of attraction. It's just a concept and an idea. Again, if you're a positive person, you're going to want to be around positive people. So when you get around, negative Nancy, you're going to be like, nah, I don't enjoy hanging out with you. There's no benefit. We just don't click. But if you're the complainer and the whiner and the life always sucks and life's always going to suck and you're pessimistic in your nature, that's exactly the type of people you're going to hang around, because you guys all have something in common. That kind of touch on what you were talking about?
Yeah, pretty much exactly what I was talking about is just basically a lot of what you want to accomplish in life and a lot of what you're going to put your time to in order to accomplish those things
Yep.
with your mindset, and starts with understanding I want X. What do I got to do to get to X? And I might run into some challenges along the way. You're probably going to fail a couple times along the way. That's all right if you have that mindset of like, yeah, I'm probably going to fail along the way a couple times. It's cool. I'm putting time towards this, and I'm going to eventually get to this place. And then after that, it's the next place. And I'll say this: name one thing that you're good at now that you didn't make mistakes along the way to get good at that. Or name one thing that you've put time to, whether it's a skill or whatever it is, that you didn't ultimately get better at. It's the same thing. And that's why this is such a good foundation, is because what we put our time to is what we're going to get good at.
Yeah, it's mental training and emotional training. It's training your cognitive ability. It's training your experiential ways that you deal with things. It's training the way that you manage emotions. Yeah, if you train yourself as a fighter, you're going to become a better fighter. If you train yourself to view and cope with something in a healthy way, you're going to get better at it. And that's what Patrick.
Right. Which kind of leads into the future
Yeah.
mindset of basically a worldly mindset is being pessimistic, and it is having like, I'm always going to be this way, which is kind of what the hopeless bullet point there is, or not really bullet point, but anyways, the always thinking you're always going to be this way. Well, to a certain extent, you're right. You are always going to be that way if you believe that, because you're not going to be pursuing things to change, or you're justifying when bad things happen, you're just reinforcing, well, of course, I'm just an unlucky guy, or any, like, those are all phrases either I've used or I've heard before, and it just keeps you trapped.
Yeah, they're self-defeating statements or self-fulfilling prophecies, so to say. People sitting there saying like, I'm always going to be this, or life's never going to get better. What thing on your inner being is going to drive that to be different if that's your expected outcome? Like, why would I put effort into doing positive things to make my life better if it's going to turn out like shit anyways? People
Right.
aren't going to make time for something that could be beneficial if they believe that it's never going to be different. Because why would you waste the time and money putting effort into something that's going to take a lot of work and effort if it has zero response and reward? That's why these video teachings, if you put effort into these unplugged from worldly thinking teachings, it's going to have benefit if you believe that it will and you put effort into it. But if you don't believe they're going to be beneficial, certainly don't listen to them, because it's not going to do anything for you except for even potentially make you angry or try to make it something that it's not, because it interferes with your misery. And I'm not here to interfere with your misery. If you want to be miserable, go be miserable. There's a lot of people in the world that are miserable, and you'll find other people to commiserate around that are miserable, and you'll somewhat believe that, hey, that's just the way life is. But this is a place for inner change and inner positivity to make your life everything that you want it to be. That's just the way that it is. So, again, with worldly thinking, you're pessimistic, you're feeling hopeless, you believe nothing will be better, you're going to be right. However, in an empowerment way, if you're optimistic, if you're truly hopeful, hopeful is not wishful thinking. Hopeful is an assuredness for things you know are going to come, because that's what you're putting effort and energy into. And then believing things will be better. And you'll be right. Now, yeah, bad things happen to good people, and some good things happen to bad people, so to say, if there's a really a good and bad people type thing. But if something negative happens to me, I'm going to have a better viewpoint of it than the majority of the world because of how I perceive that moment. And we're going to get into what changed in my inner being and my inner thinking that made that stuff true to where I don't get traumatized and I don't feel anxiety and depression, and stress is minimal, if not at all existent, in situations that would make most people stressful because of how they perceive the world. But we'll get into those teachings here in the future, but we're just giving you a foundational stuff on, managing your time and taking empowerment for time.
Right.
Want to touch on any of that?
No, I kind of opened it up there, and just like I said, I kind of repeated myself a lot in this, but it's very much whatever it is you want to do. Use these tips to start reflecting on how you use your time. And one thing that we, I guess, can cover, like one tool you can use to start looking at your time is
We'll cover those in the
make
next
a,
slide. We'll cover the
uh,
tools in the next one.
okay. But yeah, pretty much, just know that if you put time towards anything in your life, to finish up on the future point, if today you stop watching this video and whatever it is you want to do, that's your dream, your goal, or you want to improve in an area, if you put time to that, and if you can visualize that I'm going to be good at this one day, and you start putting time to that, eventually you will become better and better and better and better at that.
Sure.
Do I think certain people have a natural talent for certain things and certain people don't? Yeah, I think that plays a part. But for the most part, if you put time into something, you will eventually get better at it. How good you'll be, I don't know. But you will eventually get better at it, and just focus on constantly improving in whatever area it is you want to improve in.
No matter what it is, you're going to be a better version of yourself, even if it's minimal.
Sure.
So if you put time and effort into something, you're going to be a better version of yourself in that specific area. You may not be better than others, perhaps for a number of different reasons, but you're going to be a better version of yourself. And that's what the focus is on this entire series, is yourself. Are you a better version of yourself? That's what's important.
Right. And celebrate those little victories along the way. That's a little tip.
And the ways that you do that is you become intentional. And by becoming intentional, you are empowered. And that's what we want to get out of this time series, is be intentional with your time and be time empowered rather than a victim of time. Stop saying that you didn't have time, but rather say, I didn't make time because something else was a higher priority in that moment. Now, others may not understand this, and they may take offense to it. Oh, I'm not a priority, or that work that you were supposed to do wasn't a priority. Well, the reality of it is, obviously, it wasn't the highest priority. Otherwise, you would have made time to do it. You chose to make time doing something else because it was a higher priority in terms of how you prioritize things from those number one, physiological needs, number two, pleasure seeking, and number three, avoiding displeasure. So for you individually, it was that way. Maybe not for your boss or your spouse or your friends or family, but for you, it was that. But it's an empowering statement rather than, oh, I didn't have time. I didn't have time. No, you did have time. It seemed 24 hours a day that everybody else did. You made time to do something else because it was a higher priority. And then number two, make time to become a better version of yourself. And this is what Patrick's been really talking about in that last slide that we covered, is what you make time for is what you're going to become better at. If you make time to complain and grumble and bitch, and you're out on social media sitting there complaining and talking about how bad things are, or pointing out who harmed you or who victimized you and all this other kind of stuff, that's what you're going to become better at. You're going to become a better complainer. You're going to become a better victim. You're going to become something horrible. And I'm not talking about not reaching out for support. But when you're reaching out for support, it's not like, oh, you poor thing. If that's what you're wanting, you're never going to heal and you're never going to grow. And we'll talk about that later in that video. But if you're making time to become a better version of yourself, like, hey, anybody have any ways of dealing with this in a healthier way? Anybody else can do this so I can stop feeling this way? That would be making time for and bringing attention to something that horrific happened in a positive way. But make time, be intentional with your time. When Patrick first started, going through these changes, 3+ years ago,
Date nights.
We talked about exactly. We talked about Patrick. You need some me time. You need to sit there and make time for you. And I told him, I said, go spend a few hours at a bookstore, reading things you never read before. Be intent, like, no, going out, and doing this, no, doing the normal things you did. Pick a single evening for yourself. And I don't remember what night you picked. Maybe it was Wednesdays or Thursday nights, but it was something like that. And you were
Yeah.
intentional about taking myself out on a date. So go ahead about and talk about that.
Yeah, so definitely, I mean, I say it sort of jokingly, but was really the words used is take yourself out on a date. And the other term used is be a better friend to yourself. So I just pick a night. I don't remember what night it was. It probably was Wednesday or something like that at the time. But pretty much from I'd get home, eat, and from like 6 to 8 or 6 to 7, something like that, I'd go to a local bookstore here, shopping center, and pretty much just find a white noise generator, put my headphones in, and read a book about anything that looked interesting, different belief systems, different political viewpoints. Sometimes it was just, I'm going to go out and just hang out and have a cup of coffee. Like, one thing I think we've not mentioned in this time series is it's not a situation where you have to be on it all the time, working on myself. There's time for pleasure and to kick back and enjoy life. Like,
Hmm.
you need those moments as well. So to get started, at least give yourself time, take yourself out on a date to get away from everybody and everything. Just sit with yourself doing things you love or reading things that look interesting to you that you've never considered reading before. And for me, it just gave me a moment of like, ah, like it just, I'm away from everything and I can just sit with my thoughts and sort of, it began the process of unpacking my thoughts and what do I actually think about a certain situation.
I
And it
remember.
starts small, but eventually it grows and it grows and it grows.
I remember when we were talking before about you were such a sponge for learning, early on to where it'd be like, teach me more, teach me more, teach me more, and wanting that stuff. And then there was a time where I was like, all right, no more teaching, just live.
Right.
Just go out and live and apply and be part of the world. Don't sit there and try to learn something new. Don't try to gain some new insight. You've been doing this for weeks or maybe months. Now it's time to just enjoy the fruit of your labor. Try to enjoy the work that you put in and enjoy the life around you and actually put it to the test. See how it works. And that's what you did. You're like, yeah, you started making time for yourself and just living. And you're like, life looks really different now. Life feels really different now. Like this used to bother me and now it no longer bothers me. And this used to be this for me and now it's no longer that. It's contentment, peace, and enjoyment. And that's when you really go, wow, look how far I've come because I
Right.
made time to become a better version of myself. And now you're seeing the rewards for the effort that you put in, and now you're in that future moment, which is currently the present and enjoying it.
Sure. And that's what I kind of said on the last slide is just I touched on it briefly, but seriously celebrate the little moments as you improve on the things you improve on. It can be the smallest thing in the world that fill in the blank. Celebrate it. Build up maybe have a little bit of a rah moment of small successes because I think it drives us forward. Again, it's that positivity of focusing on the good things and people might think you're crazy for celebrating the smallest thing, but it doesn't matter because you just now improved yourself, and that's freaking awesome.
Yeah, and there's all different kinds of ways to learn. You can watch YouTube videos, you can buy a book, you can go to a seminar, you can go to a workshop, you can get individual or group counseling. There's a lot of different ways for individual improvement. Um, to make time for those things because it's going to have a future reward for that. Let's go on to number 3 here. Learn to trust in your ability to manage a future moment no different than all the moments you've already previously managed. And again, this is to help you get rid of the worry of what's going to happen in the future. You've survived all these past experiences. You've survived all these horrible or negative situations in the past. If there's one in the future, you'll manage it. If don't go through in the present worrying about what's going to happen in that future moment. Trust in your ability that you're going to manage it the best you can, and then you can reflect on it after it's occurred for growth. But don't worry about like, oh, if they say this, I'm going to say this, or if they do this, I'm going to do that. What if it never happens? Now, how much time have you wasted present,
Right.
worrying about that future interaction. Just realize I can manage it just like I did all the previous ones.
Right. There's definitely something to be said about planning for big moments in our life and being prepared for them, but
Sure.
also understand that it's gonna go how it's gonna go, you know?
You don't have all the
Uh,
information. You're not in somebody else's head. You don't
right.
you don't know all the things that are going on for interactions between now and that moment for that person, let alone for yourself of what you might learn or experience between that time, this time and that time. But whatever it's going to be, you're going to gain what you gain and have what you have, and so are they. And the outcome's going to be the outcome. Learn to just enjoy that. Hey, you know what? I'm going to manage that future moment. It's going to be what it's going to be, and I'll reflect on it. After I reflect on it, I know I'll learn and grow, and I'll be a better version of myself. That's positive thinking in the present and future.
Absolutely.
And then, last point here, learn to reflect on the past, be content in the present, and have hope for the future. And again, that hope isn't wishful thinking, it's just an assurance of things to come, confidence that you have for yourself to manage a moment in the future. Reflecting on the past is what can you learn, about yourself and about that moment, that if you, what new knowledge and experience and information can I have or learn in now and in the future that's going to help me manage a situation like that potentially any better. Yeah, if something horrific or traumatic happens, yeah, you're not learning from it happening. You're learning from what had happened and what you can gain in terms of healing and growth and emotion management and cognitive. And that's what we're here going to give you in this on.
Right.
So that wraps up this teaching that we have on how to become intentional with your time. We hope that it's beneficial. Please re listen to it. I'm sure you'll catch things you didn't catch the first time around, and then learn to put it into practice. Have these conversations with your friends and families. Share the videos so that they can hear it. Subscribe so that you can see the next one and ring that bell so that you can get these notifications and updates and interact with us. And we'll work together to become better versions of ourselves and make this world a better place to live in. Anything you want to touch on before we go, Pat?
No, not really. Just everybody who did show up today, thanks for coming, and we'll see you in the next video.
All right, guys, take care and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.